are they going to expand on what I was pulling from?
Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting for May 23rd, 2017. And I do want to make an announcement that obviously there's only 3 council members present here. We do have all 5 council members present. Council member Irene O'Connell is in a business center in Hutto, Texas on the phone, and Mayor Ruane is at the Capitol Hilton Business Center in Washington, D.C. And so I've already had my orders to get this meeting moving along because they're both 3 hours and 2 hours ahead of us. So with that, I'd like to call the order and get a roll call.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell. Here. Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here. I want to notice that I'm
Good.
participating in the meeting through
All right.
IC this evening.
Good. So if you can please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
For the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
Republic
for which it stands, one nation,
indivisible, with liberty and
Liberty.
justice for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you, and I believe I need to would like to thank the Garden Club for the beautiful arrangements that are in front of me right now. And some announcements. On June 4th, the 4th annual Community Day in the Park event will be held at City Park immediately following the 77th annual Posey Parade, which begins at 11 a.m. So it's the second year in a row that the Posey Parade is starting at 11 a.m. There's been some confusion, but we'll have that at 11 a.m. on San Mateo Avenue at Keynes Avenue, and we'll travel through downtown and across El Camino and up Crystal Springs Road to City Park. So people have always asked, what do we do to enter? It is a youth parade, so we do want predominantly youth participation with adult assistance. And if you get a brochure and you want to participate under a particular category, whether it's a float or whether it's animals or bicycles or such, you just show up, preferably about a half hour before the parade, and go to that designated area where signs will be posted for you to start, and it will be judged. So as far as Community Day, we are guaranteeing good weather and that wristbands for the rides, the carnival rides, which we have 2 new carnival rides, 2 additional carnival rides, I believe, this year, and wristbands are still available, prepaid for, I believe, $10, and they will be extremely more expensive on the day of the event. So let's try and get those kids their wristbands beforehand. Presentations, we have none. Review of the agenda. Anything we'd like to move? Seeing none? Okay, moving on to approval of minutes. Special City Council meeting of May 9th, 2017. Any comments or corrections? Seeing none, we will take a roll call vote on this. Oh, no, I'm sorry, we don't need to do it. There's no comments or corrections, and we can approve as stated. Okay, as recorded. Okay, and so now we move on to consent calendar. This is where it will get a little more complicated. So I'm going to ask the city attorney to explain how we're going to do this.
Yes, so in order to keep up with the marvels of modern technology, the Brown Act now requires that all items on the agenda be done by roll call vote if there are members of the council who are participating from outside, as you have tonight. There are 2 of you participating using teleconference. And the reason for that requirement for a roll call vote is so that everybody in the audience and members of the public can understand how the vote was actually taken, and so the vote can be accurately recorded because it may be difficult to hear a voice vote. So as a result of that, on the consent calendar, what we've decided to do is take each of those items individually so that we'll have a roll call vote on each one. And so if there are members of the public who wish to speak on any of those items, if they could let the clerk know, that would be great so that we know that in advance. And if there are members of the council on the telephone who wish to speak on those items, that would also be helpful to know now so that the chair of the meeting can take the proper actions to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. And then, of course, on the conduct of business, those will be taken in order as they usually are, and also with a roll call vote required on those items as well. Does anybody in the audience wish to pull any of the consent calendar items? And it does not appear anyone wishes to speak on those items.
Seeing none, is there anyone in the council who would like to discuss or comment on any items on the consent calendar?
Chair?
Yes?
So,
Councilmember Marty?
do I specify which one, or do we just start off going into it?
Just indicate which one you'd like to comment on, and then we'll just take them in order one at a time.
Water and wastewater.
So item 7C. Okay, so we don't need to vote to pull it, we're just going to vote on each one of them.
Correct, and when that item comes up, then council members who wish to speak on that item can make their comments.
Okay, any others? Mr. Mayor, Councilmember O'Connell, anything?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, what I'd like to do is we'll take them in order. What I'd like to do is take items 7A and B together, which is accounts payable and payroll.
Move to approve consent items A and B.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Very good. Item 7C, waive second reading and adopt ordinances enacting water and wastewater rates increased to be effective July 1st, 2017, as presented in the notice of proposed increase mailed to all property owners and residences. Councilmember Marty.
So, as people that have been paying attention, the vote was 3-2, and I was on the 2 side. And what I want to be able to discuss briefly here today is asking the council to reconsider their vote, and 2, if they're going to go ahead and proceed with the vote, to go ahead and agree to have a subcommittee, or excuse me, a study session to discuss the items that I brought up to the council's attention at the last council meeting of how we could do more with less, how we could look at increasing the rate that the new development pays for their water meters, capacity charges that haven't gone up for years, and how we could look at the billing and accounting and efficiencies of the existing water and sewer services that we provide. So there has to be some efficiency improvements there. And I know it's not going to solve the problem that we have with our old system, but it is something that we need to look into, and just increasing the rates without talking about that is really incredible to me that we do something like that without trying to do something better.
So,
Through the chair? Sorry.
hold on, Irene, I'll call on you and the mayor. And I just want to, so you are asking to have a discussion about efficiencies and also alternative fundings?
Alternative, basically, sorry. So what I'm asking is to have a study session to discuss how we can look at other revenues, how we can look at how to improve the efficiency of our system, how to look at changing the the billing practices that we currently have that loses thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. We had a consultant here that basically agreed that we should be charging that monthly capacity wastewater and water charge every month, regardless if somebody turns on their service or not, regardless if somebody has a house for sale for 3 months. That capacity charge is helping the system. It's not just when you use water, it's the availability of the water and paying your part for that service.
Okay. Okay, so, do you have anything more? Okay, Irene?
Oh, I agree that we can look at different things that we did not look at before. I don't agree that, well, I believe staff has done a fabulous job in doing many more efficiencies than they did before, and I just want it noted that 5 years ago, it was originally going to be a 10% per year raise for the next 5 years. And because of the staff, and that includes the drought, San Francisco's increased water rates, the San Francisco retrofit, paying for our share of that, all those different things, we still got it down to only 5%. So while I agree with Councilman Medina that there can be efficiencies, I'm sure, and we should look at different billing things that maybe we have never looked at before, we have been efficient. So I just want that noted, and go on from there.
Okay. Mayor Ruane?
Nothing special. Approving the rates tonight is the right thing to do, I believe, and it doesn't preclude us from looking at more efficiencies going forward. I know that the subcommittee spent an awful lot of time, as well as the consultants and staff, and what we've achieved so far, and just at the sanitary sewer overflows has been extraordinary, and I think the people who are paying for those bills need to realize that. It's way easier to pay what amounts to a little bit in the bigger picture than to pay some fines that don't go anywhere into the city to help. So I'm all in favor of approving these rates.
Okay. I personally, I'm not going to change my vote, but I'm open to not necessarily a study session at first, but I would like staff to come forward with answers to council members' questions as far as any efficiencies that we could undertake in billing, and how we can, or how we have attempted and have not been able to take care of those efficiencies. As far as additional funding, I think that's something that we have to address to staff, or give staff some direction on what funding sources or what funding ideas you have in mind before we sit in a study session and throw a bunch of ideas around without any, solid facts or any solid information. So I'm in favor of discussing it further, but until we have some anything more than just ideas, I don't think we should have a study session until we have something we can really discuss.
Through the chair.
Irene?
Marty and I are on the subcommittee for this. I'd like to suggest that he and I get together with staff and toss around some ideas about what we can present to this whole council. Okay,
you faded out on that one. I didn't hear that too well.
I'm sorry. I said Marty and I are on that subcommittee, and I'd like he and I, to meet with staff, and we can discuss some ideas about what to present.
Okay.
Through the chair. I would concur to that with Councilmember O'Connell that we have the subcommittee. They should then reconvene. They should have from staff the answers to the questions that were asked, effectiveness, efficiencies, other cost-saving mechanisms and or what we can or have some options if there are other solutions. I believe after the subcommittees met, then they can bring back forward to the council as a whole in a study session or budget time, if that works, as far as their findings.
Correct. And just a reminder that the vote does continue and the rate increase does get approved. It is the maximum rate increase, and that if any efficiencies or any other options come before the council that get approved to reduce that rate, we can do that. Yeah. Okay? Any other discussion?
No.
Okay.
Through the chair, if there's no more discussion.
Mayor Ruane.
Through the chair, if there's no more discussion, I would like to make a motion to approve item 7C on the consent calendar.
Mayor Ruane makes a motion to approve item C.
Do we have to waive the second reading, or?
He's making a motion to waive the second reading.
Well, it's a motion to approve item 7C, which includes the second reading.
That's right.
The ordinance
Right.
and everything.
He's all the way in Washington,
Okay, I
D.C.
second
and
it.
telling us what to do. Okay. Okay, so the motion is to approve item C. Is there a second?
Second, Irene.
Irene seconds. Any further
Yeah.
discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Ruane,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
No.
Councilmember Rico Medina,
No.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye. Okay, moving on to item 7D. There's no discussion. Do I have a motion for approving item D?
Move to approve
moved.
item D.
Councilmember
Move to
Rico
approve
Medina
item D.
motions to approve. Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Irene seconds. Any discussion?
Yes.
Roll call?
Councilmember Rico Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
No.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra,
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Okay, moving on. Item 7E. Motion to approve item 7E, which is to comply with the California Voter Participation Rights Act by conducting 2017 and 19 elections for 3-year council member terms and a 3-year mayoral term in 2017. Motion? Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Is there a motion to approve item E?
I'll make the motion to approve item E.
Councilmember Marty Medina makes a motion to approve item E. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Rico Medina seconds. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
No.
Vice Mayor Ibarra,
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Okay. Item F, adopt resolution accepting the Huntington Avenue Landscape Improvement Project as complete, authorizing the filing of notice of completion with the San Mateo County Recorder's Office, and authorizing release of the construction contract retention in the amount of $5,558. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Irene, Councilmember Irene O'Connell moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Ruane seconds. Roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra,
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Very good. That concludes the consent calendar. Move to item 8, public hearing. There are none. Okay, now we're going to have public comment on items not on the agenda. Individuals allowed 3 minutes, groups in attendance 5 minutes. If you are unable to remain, ask the city clerk to request, blah, 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 blah. It is the council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Please state your name and your street name, please.
Hi, good evening, members of the council. Marco Durazo, 2nd Avenue. I just wanted to kind of take note and highlight some of the positivity from this weekend's Day of the Children, City Park. It was a great event. All the schools were out there, celebration of literacy, a lot of great family fun. San Bruno Education Foundation was also present. I think the point of my comment is it would be nice if we can work toward coordinating better with the city and the school district to make sure that we're leveraging the different events, scheduling in a way that's coordinating among the city. It was like 150 degrees out there. I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but it was very hot. But it would have been nice. I know Relay for Life was a great event as well a couple weeks earlier, and then there's great events coming up in the next week. I think but for the benefit of the families and the children and all the school district, it would be great if we can coordinate and work to leverage so that we can kind of have folks at the park at the same time, same event. But overall, I think it was a great celebration for the city and for the school district as well.
Very good. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Braun.
Evening. Alan Braun, owner of Bay Hill Gym and Fitness in Bay Hill Shopping Center and former resident, as we all know, of Claremont Drive. I don't need to let the city and the council know that because of everything that's going on in the area around Bay Hill Shopping Center, Regency Centers, the property management company of Bay Hill Shopping Center, is pretty much bullying and violating everybody that has a business in the center. Okay, the poor gentleman that owns the dojo there, Mr. Lawler, was let his lease expire a week after it. They told him it's $37 a square foot on a 3,000 square foot space, or get out. My brother and I own the gym, which is the third largest building in the shopping center. They want us to pay 10% right up front and another 5% in 30 months. So over 30 months, they want us to pay 15% increase. And I'm not the only one. As Connie knows, they were supposed to send an engineer out because our roof's 40 years old. I paid out of my pocket to have an inspector look at it, which said it needs to be replaced. They sent a third-party engineer, which was pretty much in Regency's pocket, to Roy, the inspectors. They checked him, and he was a legitimate engineer, but he was in their pocket. You could tell by the way he wrote the report, because they were supposed to call myself or my brother when they came to do the investigation with your inspector, the roofer, and this engineer. Nobody called us. My brother came in at 10 o'clock. They were leaving. As soon as they saw my brother, they all took off. So Regency Centers, because of, as we know, YouTube, Google's new purchase, and everything else, is basing what the value of the shopping center is on all these super companies that are coming in the area. And Regency seems to think that they can just get away with anything they want and run everybody out of there or make them pay a fortune, and they're going to be out of business within a couple of years at the way they're running the mall. So I don't know if this is the way city can investigate into what they're doing, because I know for a fact a lot of the stuff that they're doing is illegal. I've already looked it up. Like, they have one guy that owns a business there. It's reporting his monthly earnings so they can base his garbage and everything else on it instead of just saying, you own a restaurant, pay this much a month. I caught them billing me $9,000 worth of stuff that I caught that they were trying to get me to pay that I already pay out of my pocket. For example, it was utilities. They sent me a bill. They ended up owing me $9,000. They weren't happy with it, but they had to give me the money back. They send people bills with unfortunately, there's a lot of businesses there that they get their yearly thing for the property taxes, the insurance, so on and so forth, and they just go, okay, write their checks and send it to them. I made them itemize everything. They now have to send us a sheet and we do it, but ever since we started making them do things right, they're trying to run me out of there and 3 or 4 other businesses. So I don't know if there's anything the city can do to talk to them, because they just seem to think that they can run over everybody in the center.
Well, at this point, I can't speak for the council. We can't comment on it, but your comments are duly noted.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else during public comment? Okay, thank you. We move on to item 10, conduct of business. Item 10A, appoint citizens to fill vacancies on the Citizens Crime Prevention Committee and Traffic Safety and Parking Committee. There is 1 vacancy on the Citizens Crime Prevention Committee and 2 vacancies on the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee. So how we will do this is we will take nominations here at the floor and from the mayor and also from Councilmember O'Connell, if need be, and then we'll take a vote. So are there any nominations for let's take crime prevention. Is there any nominations for Citizens Crime Prevention Committee?
Through the chair.
Through the chair, this is Jim Wayne. I'd like to nominate Rhonda Boone for crime prevention.
Second?
Okay, so the mayor has nominated Rhonda Boone, and Councilmember O'Connell has seconded. Any other nominations? Okay, let's make this official. We'll take a vote on Rhonda Boone.
Mayor Wayne,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye. So congratulations to Rhonda Boone. She is now a member of the Citizens Crime Prevention Committee. Okay, Traffic Safety and Parking Committee.
Through the chair,
Councilmember
I'd like to nominate
Rico.
George Gisboni, please.
I will second that.
So nomination
I'm
and a
sorry,
second for John
Wait a
Gisaponi.
minute. Whoa, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
There's been a nomination and a second for John Gisaponi.
Oh, okay.
First name on the list. Okay. Any other
got it.
nominations?
Through the chair.
Councilmember Marty?
I nominate Marco Durazo.
It's a nomination for Marco Durazo. Is there a second?
Second?
Councilmember O'Connell seconds Marco Durazo. Any other nominations? Seeing none, we will we'll vote for both. We'll just take a roll call vote for both. Since there are two vacancies. Is that okay? Gisaponi and Durazo.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra,
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Congratulations, and both new committee members are in the audience. Congratulations to
You can be in City Hall right now.
committee member Gisaponi and Durazo.
We'll solve everything.
Through the chair,
Councilmember Rico Medina.
can we also have staff notify Mark Howard of the TSPC that he can now serve on the subcommittee for parking, since now we have a full commission?
We will do that. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, thank you. Moving on to item 10B, adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract in an amount not to exceed $785,000 with Diet and Bhatia for preparation of the Bay Hill specific plan. And I believe our Community Development Director, David Woltering, will be providing the report.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. City staff is very enthusiastic about bringing this agenda item forward this evening. It is fundamentally about one of the city's successful local companies, YouTube, choosing San Bruno to be its home base as it continues to grow its business, and wanting at the same time to make sure that all interests, YouTube's city interests and wider community interests, are all considered and successfully advanced as the various parties work together collaboratively to move through a specific plan process. This request to prepare a specific plan for the Bay Hill area is the result of YouTube representatives sharing with the city staff that firm's plans to further develop and redevelop the properties it owns in the Bay Hill Office Park to house its growing workforce. YouTube is proposing a campus environment to accommodate this future growth. YouTube currently has a workforce of approximately 1,700 employees in the Bay Hill Office Park and may expand that force at a rate of perhaps 350 employees per year. YouTube representatives have agreed to pay the full costs for the preparation of a specific plan and associated studies, as well as all related city costs. On the overhead before you this evening is the area of the specific plan that we're discussing tonight. At the top of the screen is Highway 380. At the lower portion of the screen is San Bruno Avenue West. And to the west is Highway 280, and to the east is El Camino Real. You'll notice some cross-hatching. The red cross-hatched area is an area that is currently leased by YouTube. It's the former Gap building. The other buildings and parcels that are cross-hatched in blue represent other parcels that I'll be talking about that YouTube has purchased. YouTube first became a tenant within the Bay Hill Office Park approximately 10 years ago when it moved into 195,000 square feet of space owned by the Gap at 901 Cherry Avenue. YouTube continues to occupy that space through a lease agreement with the Gap. Over the last 2 to 3 years, YouTube has additionally leased, improved, and then purchased buildings at 900 and 1000 Cherry Avenue across from the 901 facility owned by the Gap. 900 and 1000 Cherry Avenue combined represent about 200,000 square feet of space. And then within the last 12 months, YouTube acquired 6 additional parcels within the Bay Hill Office Park. Combined, the properties at 900 and 1000 Cherry and the other parcels that you see on the overhead under ownership by YouTube equal about 900,000 square feet of lease area. Within the office park itself, the total amount of area is 1.5 million square feet. With the area that YouTube leases from the Gap and owns outright, it occupies about 2/3 of the space within the Bay Hill Park. Staff has indicated to YouTube that preparation of a specific plan for the Bay Hill area would be necessary to consider its proposed growth there, particularly given the desire to create a YouTube campus and to address the interests of other property owners within the Bay Hill area, as well as the broader city and community interests pertaining to their proposed development plans. A specific plan is a document that is developed with considerable public input and engagement that provides a guide for the physical growth of an area. Cities typically use a specific planning process in a limited geographic area where growth is expected to occur, and there is a desire to more actively guide that growth, as we have here in this case. Specific plans generally address what land uses would be appropriate in the specified area, how intense or dense those land uses may be in terms of square footage or residential units, the transportation and utility systems needed to support the land uses and their associated intensities and densities, possible phasing and financing. Specific plans provide a key benefit of comprehensively considering a wide range of development factors at one time, with the opportunity for broad-based community input. The City of San Bruno has successfully used specific plans for redeveloping the former Navy site, now known as the Crossing Development, across El Camino Real from the shops at Tanforan, and a specific plan is the current guide for redeveloping San Bruno's downtown and areas surrounding the city's BART and Caltrain stations with the San Bruno Transit Corridor's specific plan. Staff discussed this specific plan requirement with YouTube representatives, and YouTube, as noted, has agreed to fully fund the preparation of the specific plan and related city costs. This is a very comprehensive planning effort. It is expected that this specific planning effort will result in the specific plan document, a related full environmental impact report, a complete economic and fiscal study to determine the possible impacts of the YouTube growth plan on the city, and a full public engagement process. The public engagement process will include stakeholder interviews, property owner interviews, community workshops, an internet-based survey, as well as City Council and Planning Commission meetings and hearings. It is expected that the process will require 15 months to complete. While YouTube will pay all costs, city staff will administer and manage the consultant contract. Staff distributed a request for proposals, an RFP, in March of this year to 6 firms specializing in this type of work to prepare this specific plan and related studies. 3 firms responded. Proposals were received from Diet and Bhatia, Moore, Isofano Goldsman, otherwise known as MIG, and Placeworks. All 3 firms are very qualified to do this work. Staff reviewed the proposals, shared these proposals with YouTube representatives, and received their comments. Staff then conducted interviews of the 3 candidate teams that submitted proposals. The detail of the Diet and Bhatia proposal provided more certainty in terms of the scope of work of the products to be received and the ability to achieve the requested 15-month schedule for completion of the project as compared with the other proposals. With adjustments, the Diet and Bhatia cost estimate is $785,000, which is approximately $30,000 more than one of the other proposals, but about $162,000 less than the other. The breadth of expertise on the Diet and Bhatia team is impressive and quite responsive to the anticipated needs of the proposed project, covering areas including specific plan preparation, environmental, economic and fiscal, urban design, landscape design, and architecture, civil engineering, traffic, housing, and public engagement. Diet and Bhatia has done or is working successfully on numerous specific plans and master plans, including the Genentech Master Plan in South San Francisco and the Belmont Village Specific Plan and EIR in Belmont. Reference checks were very positive about Diet and Bhatia, highlighting their responsiveness and ability to work within agreed-to budgets and schedules. Diet and Bhatia has also worked favorably for the City of San Bruno in the past on the city's 2009 general plan, as well as 2 past housing element updates. This proposed specific plan and related work represents an opportunity for the local San Bruno community to work collaboratively with one of the community's major businesses, YouTube, as well as other property owner interests in the Bay Hill area to create an even more special place for innovation within San Bruno, as well as an area that is integrated with the wider San Bruno community and inclusive in terms of sharing the opportunities and benefits of the envisioned Bay Hill area with the wider San Bruno community. Accordingly, staff is recommending Diet and Bhatia to prepare the Bay Hill specific plan as the team that appears most responsive to the city's RFP and offers the skill sets that best meet the anticipated needs for the project at a competitive cost within the proposed schedule. Additionally, I would like to mention that Rajiv Bhatia, principal from Diet and Bhatia, is present this evening and could respond to your questions. And staff, my staff is here as well as myself. We'd be happy to respond to any of your questions. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions of David, Community Development Director? Any questions, Mr. Mayor? Irene?
No.
Okay. Also, I'd like to also note that in addition to Mr. Bhatia, there are representatives from YouTube, if there happens to be any questions for them. Any questions for the consultant or YouTube? Go ahead. Councilmember Marty Medina.
Looking on page 3 of 5, where staff contacted South San Francisco and Belmont, but Redwood City and Brisbane were clients of the consultant and they weren't contacted. That's the question. Were they contacted? Because it doesn't say in the report.
Right. Our staff person is here this evening that could perhaps respond to that, who did some reference checks on this. The comments generally that we received were extremely favorable. The responses we received were from South City staff and also from the Belmont staff. So those, to my knowledge, are the responses that we received, the only responses that we received for Diet and Bhatia, and they were extremely favorable.
Right. And my question is, the reason behind it is if you ask half the companies and they give a favorable response, and you didn't ask the other half the companies, then how are we to know that the other cities didn't have any problems? Just curious why we wouldn't call all of them.
If I can take that, I think that in looking at the materials from Diet and Bhatia, they actually provided quite a bit of information and provided many, a dozen or more representative projects. So our staff did do a sampling, as is typical. Staff did not contact each and every one of these dozen or more examples, but we did contact a representative example and sample, and the responses were extremely positive.
Fine.
Matt, would you like to add anything on, since I believe you made the phone calls?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Matt Neubaumer. I'm an associate planner with the Community Development Department. I would concur with what David Waltering, the Community Development Director, just discussed. We did check in with representatives from South San Francisco and City of Belmont. Both of those representatives from their respective cities spoke very positively of Diet and Bhatia, indicated that they performed all tasks within the scope of services and the budget referenced within their scope of services, and staff feels very confident in moving forward with Diet and Bhatia for the preparation of the Bay Hill specific plan. Thank you.
My question is, if I could, they're not new to San Bruno. What is Diet and Bhatia's past relationship with San Bruno?
You know, as I indicated earlier, Diet and Bhatia has worked for the city of San Bruno favorably in the past, and actually was the firm that did our 2009 general plan that's still in place, still in effect, and they also did 2 prior housing element updates. So the city has had direct experience with Diet and Bhatia, and it's been very favorable.
And I would also add that MIG is also a very active consultant in San Bruno also, and has been involved with our transit corridor plan, and also currently, I believe, is working on the proposed recreation center project.
So, actually, not the Recreation Center project. Morrow, Sifano, and Goldsman, MIG is working on 3 different projects for us right now. 2 park design projects, the Earl Glenview Park replacement and the Florida Avenue Park design, as well as they were the selected consultant to prepare our Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan, and they're working on that as well. So they have a fair amount of work with the city as well.
And we're very pleased with their services.
Absolutely, yes.
All right.
Through the chair.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Just 2 items. One, obviously, it was already in the report, but to reaffirm, the YouTube is going to reimburse the city the $785,000 for that scope of work.
Correct.
And just for disclosure, on May 12th, I met at YouTube and went over the project with some of the representatives to have a better understanding, and went into more detail so that I felt comfortable and more knowledgeable with my questions about the project and what was coming before us.
Good. And I'd also like to state that I'm on the subcommittee with the mayor, and we met possibly a few months ago.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, any further questions? Anyone from the public wants to have a question or comment on this proposal? Okay. If you can go to the microphone, please.
Okay, what I stated earlier, I'm one of the business owners in Bay Hill Shopping Center, and if I'm looking at that map correctly, it says Bay Hill specific plan area, that's Bay Hill Shopping Center right below the checkered buildings that are
Correct.
YouTube leased. So that's saying that's part of the specific plan area. What do they plan on doing in the shopping center?
Okay. We'll have staff answer that question for you.
Okay.
Any other questions? So the question is, why is Bay Hill Shopping Center included in the specific plan boundaries?
I'd be happy to respond to that. In doing a specific plan, the idea is to look at the area that would be directly affected by the planning effort. And the sense is that the Bay Hill Shopping Center would be affected by this planning effort and should be a part of the process. At this time, though, there is no information that we have that the Bay Hill Shopping Center has plans to do anything different at this time in terms of land use. However, given that we have Cherry Avenue and there's a direct connection in terms of surrounding land uses, it would be important to look at all affected areas and to make sure that all interests are part of the process. And to be clear, that in terms of the area, the Bay Hill Office Park is about 73 acres. We're including in the planning effort the office park and the shopping center, as well as 5 parcels that front on El Camino Real and San Bruno Avenue that are actually in the transit corridors plan area. And again, for the same reason, because those areas could be affected in terms of circulation and general impacts. The total area that you see here on this overhead is about 89 acres in area.
David, so when you say that everyone is going, all those parcels, even though YouTube may not be considering developing, or even any separate property owner might not consider, how do you explain the residential areas across the street of San Bruno Avenue? They will obviously be impacted or considered, studied to be considered impacted in some way.
I don't disagree with that. I did say directly affected. And so we typically, when we look at a specific plan area, we look at what I'll refer to as defined or hard edges. So when you look at, say, San Bruno Avenue West, El Camino Real, Highway 380, Highway 280, those are hard edges, as we refer to them, defined edges. So those help us define the area. Now, in terms of noticing, in terms of the process, as I mentioned, there'll be public workshops, meetings, and hearings. The entire area within the study area, the property owners will be noticed. But so too will the people in the surrounding area and be invited to come to the public workshops, meetings, and hearings.
Okay. We have someone from the public. Irene or Jim, do you have anything you'd like to add, or would you like to wait?
No, if you have a person from the public, I'd like to hear them first.
All right, state your name and your street, please.
My name is Callista Shepard. I live on Poplar Avenue. I was just wondering about the notification, because I know with the TCP, I believe it's now a 600-foot notification for any project that comes up in the TCP. I imagine that is a mailing that comes out. So what is the commitment for the radius mailing? Is that how the notifications are going to go?
Question is, what is the extent of the notification for hearings?
For the Bay Hill specific?
Yeah, good question. We extended the TCP notification from the standard 300 feet, 300-foot radius, to 600, given the fact that with what was proposed there and then approved in terms of building heights, et cetera, the City Council specifically asked us to look at ways, measures to make sure that we broaden the process. We have a pre-submittal process for the TCP. Before somebody even submits an application, they go through a pre-submittal process. So given the nature of the TCP, Measure N, et cetera, we broaden the process. We have pre-submittal, we have a broader noticing area. The standard is 300 feet. I would expect that we would use a 300-foot radius list in this case from the outer boundaries of this study area.
Through the chair.
Councilmember Rico?
Mr. Vice Mayor. So the question is, it's usually 300, are you going to do 600? And I do respect the detailed information, but for those that may have not, what's the bottom line? What's the radius?
I mentioned 300.
So 300, not 6?
Yes.
That was your question.
And my response was the standard is 300, to be more clear. Apologize.
That's okay. Thank you.
The standard is 300. I would assume we would use a 300-foot radius from the outer boundaries of this project area for this project.
Okay, so I guess a follow-up question, and I'm probably taking her time, is, I'm sorry, Clarissa, is, so we want to talk about public engagement, we want to talk about transparency and inclusiveness. So would we want to then consider or go to broadening that so that everybody affected potentially would have knowledge to these public workshops and information? Then I apologize for doing that. I have all the time back you want.
That's okay. I wonder if I
Do you
could
want to add?
qualify your question. I'm all for transparency and broadening it. I also would like to be really mindful of costs on things, and I don't know that a 600 radius mailings, strictly speaking, is going to be the extent that we need to go. I would like to request that things get proactively posted on nextdoor.com. I would like to see that actually for the TCP as well. It's a very inexpensive way to just put it out and notify. And I understand that there's some software app that the group that is going to be conducting this is going to be reaching out. And a lot of people can't make these meetings. People don't have time. That's my request. Thank you.
Okay. So it's not necessarily an extension of the radius, but possibly additional forms of communication, to the public.
That's very important, and actually that is within the scope of work of Diet and Bhatia. So for example, to be clear and offer more information, there is an internet-based survey that will go out and be available to the entire community as part of this process. There will be information on the city's website throughout this process. So we will be using the city's website. We will do an internet-based survey, and there will be multiple meetings in terms of interviews, forums, workshops, public meetings, and hearings during the 15-month period.
Okay. And for the benefit of the speaker, we could state that at the very least we will make announcements on social media such as Nextdoor to direct the public to those sites, to those surveys, and to the website for additional information.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on this item? Okay. Any further comment from the council?
No.
Through the chair, if there's no further comment, I'd like to introduce a resolution for adoption.
Mayor Ruane would like to introduce the resolution for adoption authorizing the city manager to execute consultant services agreement in an amount not to exceed $785,000 with Diet and Bhatia for preparation of the Bay Hill specific plan.
Mayor Ruane?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Rico Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra?
Aye. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Bhatia. Congratulations, YouTube. We'll look forward to some exciting developments in the coming months. Thank you.
Through the chair, as I explained earlier,
Mayor Ruane.
I'm leaving the council meeting at this point in time due to some time constraints. So I will see you back in San Bruno shortly.
Good night, goodbye. We'll see you soon, Mayor
Safe
Ruane.
travels.
Thanks, guys. Nice job. Bye.
Councilmember O'Connell, you going to stay on?
I am 2 hours ahead of you, and I am getting tired, so I will, and I read all the materials, so I respectfully say good night as well.
Good night to you also.
Good night, Irene.
Okay. Thank you. See you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Let's do our supplemental agenda now. That's a joke.
Extra agenda.
All right, moving on to item 10C. Adopt resolution approving a work plan to develop a green infrastructure plan in accordance with provision C.3.J of the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board's municipal regional permit.
Good evening, Honorable Vice Mayor and members of the City Council. For this item tonight, we have a presentation from Matt Fabry, who is the program manager with the San Mateo Countywide Water Pollution Prevention Program, to provide an overview of the need for the green infrastructure plan, and which is being required by the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the municipal regional permit. We're bringing this item tonight because the regional board is requiring agencies to develop a green infrastructure plan that demonstrates how each agency will gradually shift from traditional gray storm drain infrastructure, which channels pollutants, runoff directly into the receiving water without treatment, to a more resilient and sustainable storm drain system comprised of green infrastructure, which captures, stores, and treats stormwater using specially designed landscape systems. Approved work plan it's being required by the board as well, which needs to be completed by June 30th, 2017. And the work plan is attached in a staff report for your information. And the work plan details the various activities necessary for creating a green infrastructure plan, complying with the MRP requirements, and indicates which aspects of the green infrastructure plan will be undertaken by CCAG, and as well as by the city, and the overall schedule. And some of the requirements in the plan includes planning and prioritization of projects, a developing process for tracking completed projects, developing overall green infrastructure guidelines, detailed designs, specifications, and updating planning documents, and conducting outreach and education to public and staff. The plan must be developed and submitted to the regional board in September 2019, and allocation of sufficient resources to ensure timely development of a plan is needed as well. And the cost for the development of the plan is anticipated to be between $100,000 to $150,000, but it's currently unknown until the city obtains proposal from firms through a request for proposal process. And staff has included a proposed appropriation of $150,000 in the fiscal year 17-18 budget for this development of this plan. So now I'll turn it over to Matt, who will provide you with more information.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Mayor and members of council. I'm Matt Fabry. I work for the City County Association of Governments, or CCAG. I manage the countywide stormwater program, where we work with all of the 21 agencies in the county to help them comply with these regional stormwater permit requirements. So I'm pleased to be here this evening to talk to you in more detail about the green infrastructure planning requirements.
Yeah, welcome.
So when we talk about stormwater, what's the big deal with stormwater? As Director Tan mentioned, when it rains, first of all, we've created a lot of hard surfaces as we've urbanized a lot of impervious areas, and we've created a lot of pollutants. And when it rains, all of those pollutants get washed directly into our storm drain system, which then flows directly to our creeks, to the bay, to the ocean without any form of treatment. So all those pollutants go directly out to our water bodies and cause problems for aquatic life. It causes problems for aesthetics. It causes problems for human health that we'll talk about. So that's the overall issue with stormwater. So this is showing what things used to be like before we came in and urbanized. So this is showing that pre-development, when it rained, you'd have fairly significant amounts of evapotranspiration where the water is taken up by plants and respired. You've got a significant amount of infiltration into the ground, which helps to recharge groundwater. And you've got minimal surface flow that's running off of the landscape based on this being more permeable surfaces. Then when we came in and paved over most of the areas, we've really reduced the amount of infiltration, we've really reduced the amount of evapotranspiration, and we've significantly increased the amount of surface flow into our underground pipe system that goes directly to our receiving waters. When we talk about pollutants, it's really just about anything you could think about that could come in contact with stormwater when it rains, from trash and litter, which are things everybody sees and can understand, to things like pesticides, nutrients, and fertilizers that you may be applying to your lawns or your gardens. I'm going to talk more about mercury and PCBs in a minute. When you have construction sites, they've got a lot of construction-related materials that can get washed away when it rains. We've got a lot of vehicle-related pollutants, including metals like copper from brake pads, zinc from tires. We've got oil and hydrocarbons from oil and fluids that leak from vehicles. Even when you wash your car, you could be potentially washing these pollutants from vehicles into the storm drain system. We've also got problems with bacteria, a lot of it related to people not picking up after their pets. That can cause problems at beaches and recreational areas. But we also have problems not necessarily in San Bruno, but over on the coast side with livestock, and there could be potential for sewer overflows and sewer systems leaking that can also cause bacteria to get into our storm drain system. And even flow is a problem. As I mentioned, because we've created so many impervious surfaces, we've significantly increased the amount of flow that's leaving these areas and going into our creeks. That's why most of our creeks at this point are hardened channels, because if we didn't have the hardened channels, the significant amount of flow would completely erode those water bodies, plus we've built up basically to the edges of the creeks. So we've got a regional stormwater permit. We call it the municipal regional permit that's issued by the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is a state agency. It's issued to 76 municipal permittees in the Bay Area. All of the cities, towns in the county and San Mateo County are covered under it, as well as the folks you can see up there in the list. And this permit addresses the full spectrum of stormwater issues that you could imagine. The permit's, is 300 pages or something like that. So it's a significant document that covers a lot of things, from municipal activities, making sure that your staff, when they're doing things out in the public right-of-way, are not causing problems. It deals with commercial businesses, deals with construction sites. We've got requirements to do water quality monitoring throughout the county. We have to do public outreach and education. There are requirements on new and redevelopment, so that any significant project of any decent size these days is required to put in on-site stormwater management now. So we're gradually starting to transform the urbanized area with more sustainable stormwater management. And then we've got a bunch of requirements dealing with specific pollutants of concern that I'll talk about a couple of those in greater detail. Specifically mercury and PCBs. PCBs stands for polychlorinated biphenyls. Both of these pollutants are causing problems in the bay, where they're accumulating in fish tissues at levels that make it unsafe to eat fish from the bay. Some fish are not safe to eat at any frequency, and some fish are recommended to be eaten at reduced frequencies. Mercury was sort of a legacy issue associated with gold mining, but it's actually still an ongoing problem. We've actually got mercury blowing over from China from coal-fired power plants and then depositing on our impervious surfaces. Very low levels everywhere, but cumulatively it results in a large load to the bay. PCBs was an industrial material that it's oil, and it was a non-conductive lubricant, so it was used extensively in electrical equipment. It was also used as a plasticizing agent in caulks and sealants, and so it's tied up in buildings. So it was used extensively. It's now banned, but it's found throughout the environment when we go out and collect samples. As I mentioned, it's in fish tissues, significant levels. So we've got significant reductions required in both of these pollutants as part of the regional permit. It's important to understand that mercury and PCBs both attach strongly to sediment and particles, and so if we can put things out there in the environment that collect and filter out those particles before it goes into our water bodies, then we're helping to remove the mercury and PCBs. So this is just an example of some of the public outreach that's related to mercury and PCBs, showing recommendations in terms of fish to be consumed safely and fish that are not safe to eat. So I don't want to have you focus in on this big list, but basically when we talk about mercury and PCBs, there's sort of three areas of control that we're looking at. Either source controls, where you find a source of these things and you deal with the source. Downstream interception, which I'm going to talk about more, is where we intercept the pollutants before it gets out into our receiving waters. And then we also have some focus on outreach and recommending, to the public, risk reduction measures so that they aren't catching fish from the bay and consuming them. So I'm going to talk more about this downstream interception, specifically the stormwater treatment aspect and green infrastructure. And so when we talk about green infrastructure, we're really talking about natural systems, landscape type systems that capture, treat, and infiltrate stormwater. It's sort of restoring the natural stormwater management that we used to have before we disturbed the or created the urbanized environment. It's typically going to be distributed small-scale systems where we're collecting stormwater in small amounts all throughout the environment. And using green infrastructure is really a multi-benefit approach that addresses a lot of issues. First of all, it can help with adapting to climate change impacts. We know with climate change that precipitation patterns are going to change. We may see a lot more intense storms in the future. So having a green infrastructure system in place is going to help to mitigate some of those impacts from climate change. It's also going to help with existing flooding issues because you're going to be reducing the amount of stormwater that's flowing out into our storm drain systems and our channels. And it can also help with groundwater recharge. As we're capturing water and infiltrating it into the ground, it can get down into the groundwater basins that are then providing a more resilient, sustainable local water supply. When we talk about green infrastructure, we are talking about both public projects within the public right-of-way and public parcels, as I mentioned, these permit requirements now require private projects as they redevelop or new development, they put in green infrastructure systems to manage stormwater from their sites. So this just shows schematically what we're talking about. This is a more balanced approach where we've got more infiltration, more evapotranspiration. We're never going to get back to the pre-development conditions, but we can get to something that's more balanced than what we have now. So I want to show some examples of what this looks like, and this is actually, San Bruno was one of the early adopters when CCAG provided funding for pilot projects back in 2009, 2010, and your staff submitted a project to build this vegetated curb extension on 3rd Street, I believe it is, in San Bruno, that's right next to the National Guard Armory. And so this is an example of where they bumped out into the roadway, and so normally the flow goes right down the gutter, and now it is intercepted in this landscaped area. It's allowed to pond up, 4 to 6 inches, and then it infiltrates into the ground. And so you've got additional greening and trees as associated with that project. This is an example of City of Brisbane where they put in this large rain garden as part of their City Hall retrofit project, and it now captures all of the runoff from their parking lot as well as some of the runoff from the roof of their City Hall building. Provides a very nice vegetated landscaped amenity as you come to City Hall. This is Daly City. They put in a series of rain gardens next to the Ceremony Library. It takes runoff from the parking lot for the library as well as adjacent playing fields. And then this is in Burlingame, another example where they did a large rain garden in a parking lot as well as a vegetated curb extension out in the roadway. So this captures runoff from parking lot as well as some of the buildings on Burlingame Avenue drain out to the back of the properties and through the parking lot, as well as they're capturing some of the street runoff on Donnelly Avenue. So these are just some examples of what green infrastructure looks like. And so I wanted to just dive into what the permit requires. As Director Tan mentioned, the permit requires that all agencies develop a green infrastructure plan that's showing how you're going to gradually shift from our traditional flood control-based storm drain systems where we try to get the water away from us as fast as possible to something that's more green and sustainable where we capture it in small amounts and deal with it where it falls. So we're required to prioritize and map areas where you have potential for projects to implement green infrastructure. We're supposed to identify specific timeframes in which those projects are potentially going to be built. We have to develop design guidelines, details, and standard specifications, especially focused on projects in the public right-of-way for how green infrastructure will be implemented. Cities are required to amend all of their other relevant plans. This would include things like your general plan, the specific plan that was talked about on the previous item. These plans need to incorporate green infrastructure into those plans as appropriate. We're required to evaluate funding options for how we're going to pay for this. As you can imagine, this is not going to be cheap to do all of this. And cities are required to adopt any relevant policies or ordinances to ensure that you've got the authority to implement the plan once it's developed. We're supposed to do public outreach, staff training, and educate elected officials, which hopefully I'm doing a little bit of that tonight for the three of you. There's a requirement for early implementation, what the Water Board calls no missed opportunities. So as projects are happening during this current 5-year permit term, they want to see you looking for opportunities to incorporate green infrastructure into those projects during this 5-year permit term. And we're required to participate in processes at the regional and statewide level to promote green infrastructure. So the last two things that are the most important, first is that each agency must adopt a work plan for developing their green infrastructure plan by July 1st of this year, which is the action item before you tonight, is to approve a work plan for the city. And then you have to submit your final green infrastructure plan to the Water Board as part of your annual report that goes in September of 2019. So we've got a couple of years to develop the plan. CCAG is working with our consultants to help all of you agencies to develop these plans. We're developing a lot of model documents. The work plan that is included in your agenda report was a model work plan that we put together with our consultants. So we're doing a lot of the work to try to help cities as much as possible in developing these plans. But ultimately, there's a certain point where it's going to have to shift back to the local agencies to take it through a local planning process and do community engagement at the local level. And then the last thing is the real kicker on all of this is that the Water Board is saying that we have to collectively show that by implementing these plans, we're going to achieve actual specific numeric reductions in mercury and PCBs, both by 2020, which is the end of this current permit term, as well as by 2040. And so that's the real piece that's the challenge, is that it's one thing to develop a plan and say that you'll do your best to implement it, but it's another thing to say you have to adopt a plan and you have to show that you're going to actually achieve specific reductions in these pollutants, which really puts a hook on you that if you don't implement it, you're going to be out of compliance with the permit and subject to potential enforcement. So I wanted to close with this slide that probably nobody can read, so I apologize for that. It's the best I could pull together, but this is a slide that we've been working on to show all of the agencies in the county what we think things look like in terms of meeting the 2020 load reduction requirements. And I'll just jump to the conclusion for San Bruno is that of the countywide total that we're supposed to achieve, the current default in the permit is that we distribute that countywide total on a population basis. So the permit establishes a countywide number, and then the default, as I said, is to distribute that to the agencies on a population basis. So San Bruno is required to achieve 26 grams per year reduction in PCBs. This is just looking at PCBs out of our countywide total of 370. So we're showing, based on everything that your staff has told us in terms of how much new and redevelopment is going to happen over the next 5 years, as well as a separate program that I won't get into the details of trying to deal with building demolitions and keeping PCBs from building demolitions out of the environment. We're showing that San Bruno is only going to potentially get to about 18 grams per year. So that's a fairly significant deficit, even though we're talking about grams. It's not a lot, but to get from 18 to 26 may be a big jump. And so I just want to make clear to the council that implementation is going to be a big issue, and figuring out how collectively everybody in the county is going to get this stuff implemented. I think it's important for you to start thinking about that, and I think it's important to start thinking about how much new and redevelopment is going to happen. Make sure that your staff is given, the best information about how much new and redevelopment is going to happen. But it's also, I think, important to think about where are the opportunities to do green infrastructure within roadway projects that are already planned so that you can incorporate GI into these other planned investments. But also potentially think about things like your neighbors in South San Francisco are doing, where they are considering a regional project at Orange Memorial Park that would capture drainage from a very large acreage on Colma Creek, and looking at that project as something that would help with potential downstream flooding issues and treat a large amount of area at one time, and it may be more cost effective to do that. So I know San Bruno does have some storm drainage issues and flooding issues, and so there may be opportunities for you to look at some of those larger scale regional projects. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Fabry? I have a question. You made very clear on how much poison is out there on our surfaces, PCBs and things, and then you show examples of how you're going to collect that and just drain them into these, actual very attractive landscape yards.
Right.
What are these contaminants doing to those landscaped areas?
Well, as I mentioned,
what is the treatment?
Yeah, so the treatment on these is, as I mentioned, that these pollutants attach strongly to sediments and particles. And so the treatment that we're achieving is that we're forcing the water to go into these areas. We're designing them so that they have a certain amount of ponding capacity, and they've got specially designed soils and plants that allow the water to infiltrate fairly rapidly. And so you're getting the treatment through filtering out the particles as it filters through the soil. So you're using sort of a natural filtration system within the soils and the plant material that's in there to filter out these pollutants. Any one of these individual projects is going to be treating a relatively small drainage area. These projects are looking at something on the scale of a city block or a parking lot. And so the pollutants that are going to be coming off of any of those areas are going to be pretty small in terms of the overall quantity. And part of the issue is that the concerns in terms of looking at water quality impacts from these pollutants is that we look at much lower concentrations of these pollutants than we look at from a human health standpoint, because they bioaccumulate in these aquatic organisms and then they get eaten by bigger organisms, and it gradually goes up the food chain and continues to accumulate. And so when it gets to fish that we are consuming, it has high levels that are a concern from a public health standpoint. But so we're concerned about water quality levels of these concentrations that are much lower than they are from a human health standpoint. So I don't think that in any of these facilities you're going to accumulate pollutants in any level that's going to be any concern from a human health standpoint of anybody that's walking around in there, or kids that might go in and play in one of these things. I don't think there's going to be any concern from that standpoint. It may be that over decades that we may need to go in and dig these things out and put in new soils and replace them if there was accumulation of pollutants. But mostly what we're seeing is that the pollutants accumulate in the top inch or two of the soil.
And also, you wondered, are you familiar with with our creek that runs through the park and collects
a little bit,
all the water? So, how significant would it be that we would say filter that? So when we do get significant rain, significant storms, and it flows heavily for days.
Yeah. I mean, I think parks are great opportunities, especially when you do have a creek flowing right through a park, is that, especially if you've got a potential park retrofit in the works, is that's a perfect opportunity to potentially put in a large underground retention system where you could divert flow from a channel into an underground system where you can capture large volumes, you can gradually let it infiltrate into the ground. So it's important to look at whether those opportunities exist. They cost a lot of money to put those in. The one in South San Francisco, and we've got another one in Atherton that's being looked at being put in at an elementary school. So schools are also a good opportunity. Those are multiple millions of dollars to put those in, but we've actually got cooperative funding from Caltrans for both of those projects, and Caltrans has funding to spend on some of these projects because they have statewide impacts on water quality. They're subject to regulations all over the state, and so they've basically negotiated an agreement that they need to treat a certain number of acres per year, and so they're incentivized to work with local agencies to find some of these cooperative opportunities. And so that may be an opportunity in San Bruno if you've got a park that you've got a channel running through it, and if you've got potentially a retrofit opportunity for the park, you could potentially get funding from an entity like Caltrans, or there's grant funds that are out there that are looking for those types of projects. So I think that you could, kill a lot of birds with one stone in terms of water quality improvement as well as flood reduction, mitigation, things like that.
Kill the birds instead of the fish. Any other questions for the consultant or was for staff? Anyone else like to speak on this? Mr. Seymour.
So when I was looking at the requirements, I didn't see anything up there on the maintenance of these. Is that part of the requirements from the county to the city when these are developed? Is that the city creates a way to maintain them?
Yeah. Maintenance is an issue that always comes up on these issues, and to be clear, the requirements come from the state to the cities, and so the county is not mandating this. My agency is trying to help in terms of developing these plans, but yes, implementation is going to be a big part of it. And so if you start putting these things into your public rights of way or into your parks, there is going to be a maintenance component that's going to have to happen with that. And so I think it's going to be an issue of identifying funding not only for the capital cost but also for the long-term O&M.
So the answer is yes, the city maintains.
Yeah, thank you. That's because the piece down there on 3rd Avenue for a very long time was a dump site, not a garden. So if the site's being used, if it's not maintained and things are going into it, and then we're using the runoff into it, are we accomplishing what we're trying to do?
Sure.
These things definitely need to be maintained in order for them to function properly, and that was one thing that came to my attention was that the project in San Bruno that we had funded, I think there was some staff turnover and it sort of fell off San Bruno's radar in terms of it being something that the city needed to maintain. And so we made that clear to San Bruno that CCAG didn't fund that with the intention that it was going to be left to turn into a weed patch or something like that. So I think staff, my understanding is staff has gone out and tried to get that back in shape. But it is something that if you don't maintain these things properly, then they do stop functioning. And so there is a certain amount of maintenance. They are landscape features, so generally a lot of it is standard landscaping maintenance. But they also do a great job of collecting trash, which is another requirement that all cities are forced with dealing with. And so they does require going in periodically and cleaning out trash and things like that to keep them functional.
My last statement is I think this is wonderful. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do and Ken, what you were talking about in the park, I see your brain working, some things that we might be able to do in the park where we could get a big bang for the buck. If we have to get to 26%, it seems like we need to go for some large areas as well, but I just ask that we maintain them.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, okay. Mr. Braun.
Just my statement is just beware, because I grew up a lot of the southern part of the United States, and these are great, but you have to make sure that whoever's doing this also is concerned with. I realize we're concerned with the bay, but you have to also be concerned with the groundwater table, because I've known cities to where they put in this and it's not been put in right, and it's messed with the local water table. So and there's a couple of them that are here locally that are having problems because of stuff that they've done. So you might want to make sure that's something they do when they're doing, especially the big projects.
Okay. I'm sure engineering, public works will look at that in a technical sense. Any further discussion? If not, the recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the work plan.
Go ahead and introduce the resolution for adoption.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Oops, excuse me.
She's in bed.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye. Item 10D, the item that we've all come here for. Receive a quarterly financial report as of March 31st, 2017 for the 2016-17 operating and capital budget, and adopt resolution approving amendment of the 2016-17 operating and capital budget. Mr. O'Leary. How are you? Oh. Yeah, thank you.
Are the numbers different?
Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the council, I might point out that the Vice Mayor often puts pressure on me at these quarterly updates to make the numbers look better, but I would like to point out that that's nothing compared to the pressure of making a presentation in front of my wife. And I'd like to introduce the council. The woman who looks like she's looking for terminal number 1 is actually my wife, Judy.
Welcome. Welcome. And Mr. O'Leary, I do not put undue, I only criticize you because with the good news you provide, I'd like a little more enthusiasm, because we've been through some bad news before.
So, all right, I'll be enthusiastic.
Appropriately.
So the matter in front of the council this evening is the third quarter financial update, a look at the 16-17 budget performance through 3 quarters of the year. And I was just going to make a couple of brief comments on the information in front of you regarding 16-17, but I think what will be even more important for the council is to understand how this information begins to build the foundation for our preparation of the 17-18 budget that will be that will be in front of you in just a matter of weeks. So in looking at March 31st, 2017, the revenues of the city, you can see, were at 65% after essentially 3 quarters of the year. But I would point out the council is well aware that the property tax, for instance, is essentially received by the city in two payments during the course of the year. The first is in December, and the second is in April. So we have not received or is not shown on this report the property tax, significant property tax that we receive in the second half of the year. So far this year, like I said, we are at 65%. We're projecting that sales tax is running just slightly ahead of budget. Property tax is running slightly ahead of budget, and the hotel motel, the TOT tax, is actually running a little bit behind. One of the hotels is closed, but there is general travel activity that in San Bruno has been at an extremely high level in the last couple of years, and the budget was based on continuation of that, and we have seen some fall off on that. So I will come back to the revenues, but essentially at the three-quarter mark of the year, revenues are very, very close to the budget. On the expenditure side, and looking at 331, again, the expenditures for the general fund are at 70% of budget. Last year, at the same time, they were exactly at 70%. So I believe that obviously 75% would be the benchmark for March 31st. And so I think expenditures are running a little bit lower than budget. But again, nothing materially when looking at March 31st. So if I could switch over to, I mean, this is March 31st data. In preparation of the budget, we, in the last 6 or 8 weeks since this data, we have looked more directly and in particular expenditure levels, essentially position by position, based on vacancies, based on what the positions are, and just on, as a result of this more extensive review and really line by line looking at the budget, our estimate actually is that we are, back to revenues, we are going to be within $50,000. We're going to be $50,000 over the budget. So it's about 0.1%. We are going to be over budget. Again, looking at expenditures, looking in the weeks beyond March 31st, our estimate is that of the $42 million expenditure budget, we are going to be about at 97% at the end of the year. So we'll be less than $1 million, but we'll actually be between $500,000 and $1 million less than budget on the expenditure side. And again, that represents the council's ongoing direction for staff to look at vacancies, to look at each expenditure closely to determine the timing and if those need to go forward. So again, that magnitude of under expenditure over the course of this year is representative of what has happened in recent years. So I would say generally, again, 16, 17 overall activity is very close to what we've experienced in prior years.
To the chair.
Sorry, yes.
Question is just looking at parks at the 44%, which I know you said it's a little less on some. That's a significant less as far as the expenditures are concerned.
You're looking at the expenditure, or you're looking at the revenue? Which?
Right, the slide right now. Expenditures.
I actually don't have an answer for that, why it's so low. I will, that is, for most of them are between 66 and.
Well, that's what I was noticing. You said they were a little lower, and I appreciate that, but that is a significant difference opposed to the others. So
I would think even vacancies would not be that low. So I'll have to get.
I see the director is positioned to want to make a comment if she'd like, and she's welcome to.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, we have a relatively large appropriation in the Parks Maintenance budget for fire mitigation work that we typically start in the month of June, and so that may be a primary reason for the low expenditure, but we will spend that money in the month of June.
I actually have a more direct answer because I believe the 44% is a typo. And in looking at the report in the packet, the number is 67%. So it was an error.
We just spent money just like that. So it should be 67% with the 44%. 67%. And then what does that do to the overall total expenditure?
Well, 70
still accurate?
Yeah, 70% is, looking at the report in your packet, 70% is the correct number.
The figures are correct, it's just the percentage was wrong.
Yeah, it was a typo in that particular line.
Okay, so Ms. Burns, you don't have all that money to spend in June then, like you thought, so.
Just there is additional information in your packet related to the internal service funds and the enterprise accounts. Again, I would just say again, looking at 3 quarters, they are essentially at budget or between the 64 and or 68 and 76%. So I think again, there is nothing extraordinary in any of those funds through March 31st. The other part in the actual action item before you tonight is a budget amendment for the 3rd quarter. There are 8 items, and these are, in this instance, each one of those 8 items have come before the council in the past for action items. The council has approved these, and so this is a budget amendment that is entirely presenting actions that the council has already approved. With that, I'd answer any other questions the council has.
In essence, cleaning house here. In essence, just cleaning up the report. Okay, any questions? Chair, Councilmember Marty Medina.
I'm looking at page 1 of 2, page 90 in the packet, and just curious about the fire revenue being 177% of budget. Just wonder if you could shed a little bit of light on what that surplus is about.
The additional revenue, or essentially all the additional revenue over budget in the fire department, is a result of reimbursements the city receives for our overtime expenditures related to strike teams being sent for CAL FIRE. So there is, on the other side of the ledger, there is additional overtime spent in those instances beyond the budget, and this is the revenue reimbursement that we receive. We typically, not knowing what the season is going to be, we don't actually budget for that, so it is an excess amount. It's shown as additional revenue beyond the budget.
Anything else? Anything else? Okay.
Jim's wife's here. I'm going to be nice.
Okay.
Judy's here. I'm going to be nice tonight.
Generally good news. Good projections, good forecasting. And with that, we need to approve the budget amendment. And so if there's a resolution.
I'll go ahead and introduce the resolution approving the amendment of the 216-217 operating and capital budget.
Roll call.
Councilmember Rico Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Get back to the budget. That concludes conduct of business. Move to item 11, report of commissions, boards, and committees. There are none. Comments from council members? Anything?
We're good. We got a couple things.
Okay.
Well, it was said earlier about the Children's Day in the park. We also had another great event over Police Day, the 35th annual Police Day at Tan Fran Park. If you missed it, it was incredible. The dogs they had there. There were so many different organizations and attending, and it was really great. So I'd like to thank staff and for all the agencies that participated in that. An announcement, this Saturday at the American Legion, it's the last Saturday of the month, so that means breakfast. All you can eat breakfast, starting at 8:30 this time to 11 for $10. Made to order omelets, and you're supporting a great cause during Memorial Day weekend, right? That's what this is all about. Which brings us to the Memorial Day services at the Golden Gate Cemeteries. Monday at 10:30, the music starts. So I encourage you all to attend that if you can. Those are my announcements.
Okay. Through the chair. Really quick to add on, tomorrow over at Public Works at the Corporation Yard is the Public Works Open House, which is open from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. for anybody from the public that wants to go see, ask questions, understand, and have a better appreciation for the staff and what the facility does.
Okay, and thank you. Just to say that at Memorial Day at the Golden Gate National Cemetery, there'll be free coffee, donuts, and beverages. Yes.
Also wanted to add that the City of San Bruno has adopted the 101st Airborne Division that is going to be departing to Cameroon, Africa, and they're taking donations for care packages and letters and so forth. So I would believe that would be on the city's website. So if you have a chance to write a thank you letter during Memorial Day weekend, I think that would be appropriate time. Thank you.
Do we have a retraction or a correction for you?
No, I just wanted to clear. I said Public Works, Corporation Yard.
No, Public Works, it'll be at the pool. No, it will be at the pool.
I apologize.
It'll be at the pool parking lot. It's actually been.
I wasn't reading the lips very well. Thank you.
It's been at the Corporation Yard in previous years. We're trying something new this year to see if maybe we can encourage a little bit more convenience and opportunity for people to attend. So
thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Connie. Jimmy, just raise your hand and say.
You might get the preschoolers from St. Andrews to attend. Also, I'd like to mention that, and I haven't had the opportunity to see it in person, but the new paving at City Park is complete, and it's like a new slurry seal on your own street, and it's smooth and without any potholes or any cracks or anything. So go out there, put your leash on your dog, and go take a look at the new paving around City Park, and so which will go into phase 2 and hopefully in the upper part of the park. Also, any other comments? Okay. Before we adjourn, I've had a request from a lady named Lucinda Williams, and she is the city clerk of Fullerton, California, but she's also a proud third-generation San Brunan. She wrote me and said her mother, Gail Diane Stoddard Williams, is a lifelong San Bruno resident residing in the same house on Linden Avenue for nearly all of her 70 years. However, she lost her battle with diabetes on May 15th, 2017. Mrs. Stoddard Williams and her husband raised 2 children in the same home she grew up on, Linden Avenue, and her 2 children attended San Bruno schools, Allen Elementary, Parkside Junior High, and Cappuccino High School. It's a proud hometown, and she kept tabs on city activities, watching council meeting broadcasts on San Bruno Cable, and she was never shy about sharing her sometimes feisty opinions of the proceedings with her daughter as she watched the broadcast. That's all she wrote. She didn't name any names. So, she loved all things purple, all things owls, and was an avid genealogy buff, lucky enough to live in a town housing a branch of the National Archives. So she really get a kick out of being included into the history of San Bruno as we adjourn in her memory. And finally, Ms. Lucinda Williams states that she thanks the council for recognizing her mother, and that on her next trip to family, she will also be visiting Rolling Pin Donuts for the world's best apple fritters. So we adjourn this meeting tonight in the memory of longtime resident Gail Diane Stoddard Williams. Meeting adjourned.